Welcome everybody to Anti-AI Monday, so it seems. And thankfully, at least on the animation front, there isn't actually too much AI news. Finally, we've been given a break. But then you come to the images side of things. Because in case you weren't aware, Google has now added their latest update in the AI image generation game with Nano Banana, which is able to produce, so they say, 99% accurate photorealistic images. And when you look at some of the stuff, yeah, it does look that way. Nightmares. It very much seems like generative AI technology keeps expanding its presence into our lives. It truly feels like it's becoming omnipresent and inescapable. And it is a grim reminder of how bad things can get. Obviously, I didn't do anything for Thanksgiving, but a member of my team spent Thanksgiving spending a good chunk of time with a family member who was just addicted to scrolling through AI Instagram reels. And it only took pointing out that they were fake each and every time for them to dismiss it. In this case, it was just funny animal videos. But this story made me realize the potential impact this technology has as it only continues to get better and more accurate. So today, I want to do a little bit of an interesting thought experiment. I want to play devil's advocate here because it very much seems inevitable that AI is coming for animation no matter what we say or what we do. So, as a silver lining to all of this nightmare, today I'm going to try to come to the conclusion on if there is any ethical way to use generative AI in animation. Because there is a lot of examples of Gen AI being used currently, and I kind of hate all of it. Obviously, right? Disney AI is a thing that is now being planned over on the Disney Plus platform, seemingly trying to be an AI shorts content kind of social media tab, gunning for what the Sora 2 app already has, but now with blatant copyright infringements of Disney characters that the company owns the rights to, but the artists made all of the foundational groundwork of up to this point. Terrible, right? And in an almost entirely identical front, but on the other side of a lawsuit, how ironic, you have the likes of Sora 2 AI and OpenAI with generative AI models that are just blatant copyright infringements, scraping the internet for every artistic source they can find and releasing it to the public so that everyone can get on board with the art theft. It's only a problem when they use Disney characters because they have the money to actually sue them for it. And when it comes to the bulk of AI animation that's come out, like the stuff I'll be shuffling in this video, plenty simply use these fully generative models in order to make shot-for-shot some sort of trailer or movie or storyboard. They simply use the direct model usage of OpenAI or Sora 2 in order to paste it all together and do 100% of the work for them, minus the words at the beginning for a prompt. Often using these early days preliminary models that are routinely screwed up that right now are kind of funny because they're inaccurate, but they won't be the more functionally correct they get. It's funny for the absurd premises and shock humor people like to go to straight away. And maybe as well, that alone could be something problematic, that these models actually have the knowledge of these problematic premises to then regurgitate out with seemingly very little restrictions. That alone is its own ethical nightmare. But on the most basic preliminary AI animation front, that is clearly a terrible usage and incredibly unethical along the way. And even when that's just done by a random person on a whim with no intentions or awareness of malice, you then also have actual mainline professionals getting in with this exact same model, with another example being the AI movie coming up soon, Critters, which is simply using a model, and it's terrible. From the short film teaser we've had in the past, it's just a bunch of creatures staring at the camera, because it was very early days generative AI, and the fact that it's terrible only makes it look even worse. But the whole idea is bad as well. Even if it's supposedly being used to create original characters and creatures, it's clearly still going to be derivative of whatever artist work were blended together to make the AI model functional in the first place. Essentially, as the very first hurdle and point towards what makes AI animation ethical or not, is simply the use of these AI models being intrinsically art theft. OpenAI, Sora 2, Nano Banana, what a weird name by the way, like why don't you just call yourself Micro Penis? This sounds like the AI generation that Microsoft would have made, you know? Nano Banana, are we serious? Anyway, each of these AI models, through the very sources they have scraped together, immediately make them each completely unethical to use. That is a blanket bottom line. These will never be correct. In order to make a version of AI animation that is in theory ethical, first things first, you would need, I think, a custom AI model in order to circumnavigate this. And there would need to be certain restrictions and ideals and foundational elements to this new AI model in order to be ethical. But we'll get there as we go. That's like a 0.1 along the way. And the concept of a custom AI model isn't even totally alien in this AI animation industry already, as there is at least one we know up front and center in the form of Coca-Cola. They have their own AI model titled Real Magic, fully created in-house to make their own version of AI generation without having to rely on those pesky bad guys OpenAI and Sora and Micropenis. Now, whether that new Real Magic AI model is sourced ethically itself is a whole other matter, and I don't think I got very high hopes. But it is at least plausible for companies to rely on in-house AI models not available for public consumption and, in theory, could be made with a more ethical source. So jot that down, a custom AI model is possible, and part of the steps towards maybe ethical AI animation. We still might come to the conclusion that no, there is no way, but I'm trying my best here. I'm playing devil's advocate where I possibly can. And though Google Nano Banana may be the latest toy to play around with, and I'm sure we'll see all sorts of more AI stuff from them soon, with it being open to even more photorealism, that comes with its own all sorts of potential impact. I mean, just straight up on the actual real-life ethical front, having a generative AI model that doesn't have restrictions for who you can have involved in said images with prompts that were previously banned under Google's AI system and now is not so, certainly seems to be an interesting pathway to allow you to make certain pictures of events to discredit future controversies. That is horrendous on its own, and muddying the waters that you have to use Google AI in order to scan an image for whether it was made by AI as well. Ethical nightmare. In the run-up for what is the least ethical AI model, I kind of think Google's Nano Banana is getting to the bottom of the barrel. But at the very least, while it's photos and photorealism, it's just doing what Photoshop already does. But it is quickly a slippery slope in the real world. Or the not quite real world, but surprisingly accurate. What's worse is this kind of stuff signifies that an extreme likelihood will eventually be that AI video generation will get to this same place, via Google or any of them. But before we continue, let me talk to you about our sponsor today, Hungry Minds, who have put together the ultimate guide to rebuilding civilization. Now, this is just a juggernaut of a book, and more than just a history lesson. This thing is absolutely draped in gorgeous illustrations and inspirational knowledge. A real encyclopedic expression of everything humanity as a whole has achieved, with topics on basic survival, technological achievements, and the development of crafts over the years. And I mean all sorts of crafts. Like, some of these pages are about cooking, sometimes it's about cities, and sometimes it's about playing cards and how to build eyeglasses back in the day. And of course, it is fully made by man. This comes off of the back of a successful global crowdfunding, raising over $2 million on Kickstarter and Indiegogo just to get this thing going, with more than 50 professionals on board to put it all together. And with it being the season, it is, of course, the perfect Christmas gift for anyone with an intrigue on everything that has brought us up to here. And I mean, look, they've even got Santa in here already. Now, I'm personally a real big fan of a book exactly like this. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in here I obviously didn't know about earlier. Really reminds me of childhood memories of digging through museum encyclopedia books, you know? It's very fascinating and brilliantly crafted. And this thing really does cover everything. Not to mention some additional pages if you're curious about covering every aspect of humanity. There's all sorts of bundle options with this guide, or even a simple gift card could be exactly what you're after this Christmas season. So check out our link in the description below, or use the promo code DAZ to get 10% off your order. But otherwise, thanks again to Hungry Minds for sponsoring this video, and let's return to your usually scheduled content. An extreme likelihood will eventually be that AI video generation will get to this same place, via Google or any of them. And that's not only terrible for the animation industry, but for live action performers too, who would be replaced by AI. It's just terrible for workers in general, And that's another hurdle we're gonna have to work out first. In fact, we already have AI actors now. Not only are you able to have AI-generated fake photorealistic people to do voiceovers and appear in videos, but even in live action, of course, we have the main upfront actress who made headlines a couple months ago. I hate this, and I reckon most people do. We don't want to watch a live-action movie without the humans in it, you know? The very act of storytelling is an artistic expression of a human experience or imagination. By replacing them simply with AI generations of people, you lose something along the way, typically. But is there any room for an AI replacement of a person? Well, there is an example I can think of. It's an interesting discussion of its own. It loops us back to bloody Disney again, but it is AI generation for the deceased. Back when James Earl Jones passed away, it was noted that Disney actually was given consensual rights to use the voice of Darth Vader after his passing. This was a contractual right given via full consent in order to continue the usage of an actor's performance beyond their time on this world. And the fact that it was taken via real living consent absolutely opens the door to this potentially being ethical usage, even if the final result is technically puppeteering a now dead person. In this case, it was mostly simply the voice for Darth Vader, with his design obviously being pretty inhuman from the outside. But there is an argument to whether in the future, having actors choosing to appear on screen after they're gone would be something potentially accepted. Ethical, I don't know, but at least it was taken via their choice. And I certainly would hate if we got to a scenario where the estate of someone passed simply gave consent, as opposed to the person while they were physically living. That's an unethical spin. It's a future we're gonna get to, I can tell you now. And whilst there is the conversation of the rights around someone's, forgotten the word for it, but look, presence, existence, there have also been examples of the complete opposite, where consent was seemingly stolen, like in the example of extras in a Netflix show, or how there was these SAG-AFTRA strikes because there were contractual obligations for extras to give up their likeness, that was the word, likeness, to these companies so they could be used and repurposed as extras in the background of shots. And that's pretty terrible, especially without financial compensation. Now that's a point we'll get into. So the slippery slope argument between that is simply having the correct crediting for the person being used in their AI spin, especially when consensual, allows an easing of the negativity in association with it. I also think a big part of it will be the transparency of knowing whether something is AI produced or what they gathered from their AI sources. The kind of thing you could slap together in the credits at the end, but is very important, especially in a day and age where video games are being mass refunded because they have far more AI slop than previously marketed. It's a thing that we want to know if AI is being used, let alone used ethically. You can't hide it. That's unethical in itself. Whilst on the flip side, if we do go into the contractual right obligations of someone using your likeness or your voice in animation and films in general, there is then the element of future contracts all requiring AI consent, or else you don't get to enter the animation or film industry at all. It's not perfect no matter how we try to spin it. Unless a studio doesn't do that. You know, a silver lining, not everyone's the same. Like Illumination hating AI when everyone else is doing it. Yet another integral point to making AI ethical is you have to have the aim to avoid art theft itself, as well as compromising any rights without consent. There are some other bizarre examples of AI being used in an interesting way with an ethical slippery slope to it. Take, for example, that old Will Smith concert, whereby there was real footage of this concert experience, but for some reason they pasted over it with AI in order to emphasize it? I don't know. It looked weird and it looked sloppy, and that lack of quality certainly adds to a negativity associated with AI. But at the same time, the use of AI to polish up a final product isn't entirely hated, especially when it's on the back end of more technical issues. Take, for example, AI upscaling. It's not perfect, and sometimes can look terrible, But if it works functionally as a high quality thing that simply boosts the resolution, and if it certainly was imperceptibly good quality, a lot of people accept it consuming it, and a lot of people accept it producing it. Even recently, Adobe has recently added on their video editing software Premiere Pro to do automated video rotoscoping. It's not quite the same thing, it's an AI tool, but being able to cut someone out and put text behind them, I'm not going to do it, I don't have the update, is as well an AI backend thing that you could argue is animation, it's animating keyframes around a body, that is generally well accepted, especially if it doesn't take away a job along the way. Adobe in general is open to generative AI in their Photoshop works in general. Sometimes it's the kind of thing of deleting someone in the background or adding a smile or removing blur, and again, they're AI tools that are accepted. When it comes to generative of, hey, make this frame bigger, we are less inclined towards it. It's interesting, isn't it? When it's small, intricate details of changing slightly what is reality, that's kind of just like what Photoshop has always done in the past, but when it's outright replacing and inventing new territory, we ain't quite so hot on it. Especially in this decade, I wonder if it'll be the same in 30 years. Or 2. Even still, all that to say, another point to note, if it's a booster for something on the technical backend, it is generally accepted in photography, depending especially on the quality. If AI slop looks like slop, it will likely never be accepted, but as AI technology improves and becomes less sloppy, you will probably find these things more acceptable. Whether that changes the ethicality of it, we'll see. We still got more points to cover though. Other examples of modern day AI usage in animation is the unfortunate use of what I'm describing as consumable artists. We talked about this previously with a couple of Netflix creators who have decided to make their own AI movie, but they're not technically conducting art theft because they're hiring artists to create a style and then getting an AI model to use the style created with these artists choosing to be blended into the machine. Similarly, a couple years ago, the Corridor Digital YouTube channel did a similar thing, at first doing just a general artist from the 90s, and then afterwards using a consumable artist to create an art style that they then pasted over live action. The kind of thing that an artist would otherwise have to manually do frame by frame, as like a boosted version of rotoscoping itself, but it wasn't perceived very well because it was either art theft or the concept of a consumable artist, which is, you know, a grey area, to say the least. That one as well is a particularly interesting case because it's putting art style over live action. I don't know even where to start with that one. But generally though, big point here, of course, if we haven't mentioned it already, art theft is a major negative for AI production. But it is interesting to note that there are attempts to incorporate artists into the process, even generatively. So maybe there's a spin that can be used on that. And so, as we're starting to come to a conclusion, I'm going to put all these points together to give you a pitch towards the end of this. But we do also have 3 mainline 3D animation studios and their usage of AI that can open up a little bit of the options for us. Now, Pixar, of course, have had a long-running technological push in most of the things that they make. There are documentations of all sorts of products they've created pushing the boundaries of their technology, and some of it does include generative AI, more so in the likes of generating a fire for Elemental, but there are other elements of them testing things in the background and not actually applying them to their movies that is interesting to see. As a technological push, AI would make sense as something to poke around with if you can find the correct spin. Meanwhile, Sony and Spider-Verse have found a decent spin with them using generative AI for facial features for their characters. In these cases, they're not at all removing the jobs of an animator, they're simply creating an AI tool workflow in order to improve the efficiency and allow the building of facial structure that would otherwise be quite menial to a human day by day. And going even further than that, there is also this theoretical one from Disney coming out, whereby they have a demonstration of using generative AI simply for the in-betweenings of animation. This is from Disney's own presentation, but essentially they're implying that humans do the main keyframes, the defining features of emotion, and generative AI simply fills the gaps in between those points and does the menial in-between work that's not really animation, it's just point A to point B. Is that animation? How do you define that? Is that just keyframing, or is that the part of the thing you couldn't make a human not do? Again, it's all slippery slopes. I'm trying my best to find an ethical spin against all of this. But in that case as well, it doesn't remove an animator's job, it just boosts the efficiency of what they need to do. They get to do the actual artistic point of designing a motion, and the AI simply makes the motion happen, using it as an AI tool whilst humans produce the primary component of what the animation actually is. Okay, so with all of that together, we've seen several examples of how GenAI is currently being used and how it could be spun with certain different elements in order to possibly be the least unethical version that it currently is. Let's put all of those pieces together, and I'm going to come up now with a pitch for the most ethical version of generative AI I can think of in the animation industry. But at the end of the day, this is still going to be pretty choppy. We're going to see what we can do. So, hey there, thank you for making it to the halfway mark of this video. Come subscribe if you haven't already for more anti-AI news, coverage, and thoughts. I like to cover all things animation, and AI is unfortunately a growing part of it now. So come along if you're interested in more, and let's get back to the second half of if it's possible to do AI ethically. We're going to see what we can do. So, the very, very first thing at the center of this idea is you would need a new custom generative AI model. One that is built entirely on sources taken with consent. This is one of the main issues with generative AI. It scrapes from the internet and it's theft from artists. You need a new model that we've seen can be custom made and all sourced ethically via either consent from the artist involved or as some sort of commissions and residual rate. That's my big pitch there. Every time you use the model, it is transparent on what sources it's using to build it, and gives out residuals to any artist who have consented to having their work implanted in said model. It can be minuscule, 1/100th of a penny every time a frame is used, but going on the logic that so much AI animation is actually produced, it would still work to be a notable amount of residuals. This is something you just have to work out in the contracts. You know in the modern day it's going to be exploitatively low, but if there's room for residuals to have a real impact in their usage in AI, it's the closest you could get to consensual art theft. In the same way of a consumable artist, it's an artist sending away their art to be commissioned, and the AI simply takes scrapes of it and pays their artists for their work. Theft, but also being paid. Funnily enough, actually, as a controversial anecdote for you, I was actually offered an AI opportunity for my YouTube channel. An AI company approached me and said, we would like to pay you to take all of your videos and put it into our machine. We're trying to make an ethically sourced AI model. Now, I don't actually think we got to a point of the conversation where they gave me a number. I think it would have been somewhere around £20,000 and £30,000 for all of my stuff. I didn't end up taking it, obviously, but I do think it's an interesting conversation of, for a start, would you have hated me more that I chose to put my video into an AI making machine? Or would you have said, well, you might as well get paid because otherwise another AI machine's going to come in and take it forcibly? I already know my original Playmobil video is in some AI machine thanks to a website that shares the transparency of that in fact got taken. It's an interesting discussion, but I do think it is, at least in this case, the best case scenario for actual good ethical usage of AI if it has to be used at all. Residuals is the central point based off of a custom AI model. But there's all sorts more here. Because as for what the AI is actually generating, we of course would most likely want it to be used in order to simply accelerate an animator's role. You would want AI tools for the menial work and minimizing actual job losses. More so than that as well, I would presume we would only want it to be generative for the in-betweens of animation and the likes like that, and perhaps the designing of the characters if it's baked off of something else. If it is, this is the character we're building, you have someone sculpt that character once with all the angles and whatever, and then the AI can then plant that character into a shot, doing the intricacies of the design, so you don't have to constantly resculpt. Not that that's how it works in 3D animation anyway. Maybe just the in-betweens. The main point that I'm trying to say here, maybe a better way to word it, is you would want human touch for the upfront elements of the actual animation. You want a human to be able to dictate how an animation is animated, and the AI is only used for the back ends, the background stuff, but the humans contribute the main bit of the animation, whatever that entails, whether that is the shot list and the framing, the main keyframes of an animation, an AI can run the logic behind a scene. Furthermore than that, you of course need to have full credits to the artist and creators baked into this AI generation, however best you can. I think it could easily be a simple thing of in the credits to say this was created by the bleebity blab AI model. Here's a list of all of our artists that we used in particular shots. If you can have a model that is transparent on what sources it used per shot or frame so that you can directly say, oh, it didn't use 100% of its sources, it only used these, and then you are transparent about that, it's probably the best ethical spin you can make. Beyond, pay them with residuals. More so than that, going similar to the custom AI idea, it would probably be best for this to be a private AI model, not fit for public consumption. It allows for these models to not be actually exploited to go far beyond their means, unless it itself came with a subscription service that pays for the artist being used in residuals. You know, you can't use this character without paying for it a little bit, and that money goes towards the person who designed that character. That makes the most logical sense if you had to do public consumption. Otherwise, I'd cull it entirely. What you want as well is minimal jobs removed, wherever possible. But the other thing that is particularly hard to manage, and we haven't mentioned this whole time, is making sure it has an environmentally minimal impact. Now, this is a massive hurdle to handle, and it's not gonna be that easy. AI generation uses up a lot of water and energy and resources that are not infinite. And as it currently stands, it is massively wasteful in efficiency and functionality. Making an AI model that is minimally impactful is probably likely impossible, but workable piece by piece. Chances are this general problem will get better with time. As the technology of AI improves, it will likely become more efficient and better at its job, and hopefully becomes more environmentally efficient over time as well. But on the other hand, take for example that AI Coca-Cola advert. Supposedly it used like 60 or 70,000 shots, and artists had to go through and refine what version of a shot they need. That kind of need for refinement and a complete smorgasbord of generation just doesn't cut it environmentally. The fact that AI generation models have to produce an entire shot, and then if you need to make a tweak, it produces an entirely new shot from scratch, is an obvious problem. So the next thing you probably need is more on the back end of how an AI model generates, because the next best step, especially on the environmental front, is having more human controls in how the AI model is used and generated. It needs to be a model that allows you to tweak individual details specifically, rather than scrapping it all and starting again. What I'm asking for here is an AI generation model that produces an animation workflow, even if generatively. i.e., I don't want a rendered video, I want a rendered 3D edited space, you know? I want a behind the scenes scene of here's what I built. You can see the window, you can press play, there's the whole shot playing. Now, if you want to go in and tweak the facial structure, if you want to go in and change the keyframes, if you want to change the lighting, the scene is generatively built, not just the final rendered video. That already, I guess, is a beefy generation, but it's a kind of generation that allows tweaking for individual elements that might be more environmentally impactful or less, because I'm basically asking for a 3D element out of a 2D generated result, if that makes sense. If the rendered video is a 2D plane, I'm asking for a 3D deep pan thing. But that's probably the next best option. It doesn't generate the final product, it generates the production itself. Crazy, but also probably the best version of an ethical AI. Artistically and environmentally. Furthermore, there's other things you can use the AI for that's not as particularly hated. Generally, sprucing up some of the post-production, where best. AI upscaling is dealable, especially if the quality isn't actually lost. Successful lighting additions you could ask for, but also just get an animator to chuck it in. But if it's built in there, we wouldn't know or hate it. Ugh, I hate this. Or repurposing for alternative formats. It's the same as just rendering it again, but now in vertical. If an AI model does that for you, cool, great, you know, naturally rescaling. It's more just AI tools in the back end you could do. So let's say you go further down the line, so you produce this AI movie, it's got crediting, residuals, human work at the forefront, it generates a scene and gets tweaked and upscaled, whatever. When it comes to making a poster design, a generative image, you're just gonna hate it. I don't know really how you could spin a generative AI poster well, unless it had really a few of these notable things. Unfortunately, the first one is probably the hardest, which is that it would be accepted if it was impassably good quality. If you can't tell the image is AI generated, it'll be more accepted. I think one of the big problems with AI slop, amongst everything else, is the slop. What's the point of slapping together a lazy movie if the final result is itself not high quality? I'm not going to consume a sloppy movie, whether it's human or AI, unless ironically, on the human front. If you can make AI generation so good that I can't tell it's AI, that's better because it's not sloppy AI. It's not great, but it's better. Furthermore, I guess when it comes to poster designs, I would want it to also be artistically inclined, you know? Kill the floating heads, I don't care how well they work. If it's a lazy image with no good composition, we're not going to enjoy it. We want quality, if anything. And really what you probably need, what I'm asking for, is it's to still be edited by the human touch, you know? If the faces are going the wrong direction, have a human go in and Photoshop it better. It's the best you can do, man. There are other elements of AI usage seen and could be used in movies. They're kind of getting diminishing returns at this point, like AI scripting work. This is hard to find a spin. You could perhaps use it for writer's block. Hopefully you never see that part of the process. Because generally, when it comes to AI scripting, it's only ever really gonna regurgitate cliches. I know you can make the argument that every story is derivative of something these days. It also still means, especially if produced by AI, that it's never gonna create the best version of a movie. You could ask for more back-end stuff, better ways to link it to the general themes of a story, but a human writer would feasibly be better here at every step along the way. It's only better for efficiency if you remove that writer, and that's not ethical. It's not even that great for rhyming or songwriting, you know? Just hire a songwriter. And in fact, when we learn that anything could be faintly AI scripted, it gets all sorts of backlash, so just ignore it. There was briefly controversy around whether K-pop Demon Hunter's Soda Pop song was written by AI in order to sound soulless. I don't think that's the case. I think it just came and went, that drama. But we had the same thing with Disney's Wish. With their songs being so low quality, it was accused of AI. Just don't do that one. Skip it entirely for an ethical spin. If you had to get it in there, it would need to be absolutely perfect and of high quality. That's kind of how you do ethical AI, you hide it. But then that's not ethical, it's the paradox here. And then one final angle is the very prevalent AI voiceover. And, just no. This is always poor quality. It always takes away a job. And unless it's done on residuals as well, voice actors consenting to their voice and being paid pennies per second used, I don't really think there's a good spin until the quality gets good and you get full credit. The idea of me inserting my voice into an AI model and getting paid each time someone else uses it doesn't sound terrible. You know, give me pennies per word or an upfront fee for usage, whatever's cheaper. That's the best spin I could think, fully consensual and paid. Or similarly, you again do it for the deceased. Residuals going to the estate, but specifically consented by the person while they're alive, not consented by the estate. It gets funky, you know? And when it comes to AI music, it's unfortunately more accepted. I think more so because there's humor to it, you know? There's a lot of comedy to be made around AI voice covers, even if they're unethically produced, because it does take away from the performer and the voice replicant. That being said, the music industry itself is always an exploitative poison, but residuals in that front would probably fix that answer too. So, gathering all those good spins together and summarizing it into a solid core, here is my pitch for the most ethical way you could run AI-generated animation. It's not perfect, I'm playing devil's advocate, but this is what I think it would most look like. Tell me what you think. So, I would request a custom AI model, ethically sourced with full consent and residuals to any sources used, be it voice acting, artist designs, or somebody's likeness. They all are credited, it's fully transparent which sources were used, and everyone is fairly compensated. Generation-wise, the model generates an animation workflow that allows it to be manually customized by a set of animators on the small intricate details, so as to not create a full redo of a shot every time you need to change the way somebody smiles. You also need to have the human effort of the animation work at the forefront of this thing. They work on the main keyframes of an animation, the general idea, the composition, and the actual artistry in it, and the AI simply works on the menial backend stuff that's more so wastes a lot of time to boost the efficiency of the animators that haven't lost their jobs working on this. With these latest two things in mind, it gives us minimum generation and minimal job loss. The final product then needs to be polished to a point of removing all sloppiness. In order for AI to be ethical, it needs to be incredibly premium high quality. Because no matter how great the sources are, if you're feeding us slop, you're feeding us slop. Remove the slop in AI slop, and you get better towards it. If you create imperceptible high quality created via that human touch, that is probably the most ethical and well-produced version of generative AI animation. Bonus points make it artistically sound, likely from the use of the humans individually tweaking it to make it actual cinema, actual literature that has something to contribute or tell a message and isn't just fuel to the fire that is slop short content. And there you have the best version of what I can spin as an ethical version of AI animation. Whilst at the same time, there are some problems with that conclusion. Like, I'm asking for a model that is not publicly accessible. It's not free, and it's not open. It's not the democratization of the creative field, as people say, mainly because this way, it is not theft. But is keeping it private in and of itself flawed? Does that narrow the options only to the already rich companies making AI animation like Coca-Cola? Or would it be better to request a subscription service to an ethical AI model that can do things in the best possible way, while still having a barrier to entry if it creates a workflow that people have to learn to animate with anyway? It's not perfect. But the fact of the matter is, AI generation in all forms is coming at our world at a breakneck pace, and so many examples in the real world are just so unethically put together that it's debilitating to think about. And while Google micropenis is out there making possibly some of the worst spins of ethicality right now, this is the best version of AI I could find, and even then, I wouldn't be too hot on a movie like this anyway. Some of the best things we can do in this current age is simply not participate, contribute, or finance these kind of AI models and productions. So when it's soon enough that there's gonna be AI movies, the best thing you can really do to combat it, the most ethical thing you can do, is simply just avoid it. Because the more we physically support this industry, the more it's gonna poison real art, take away real jobs, and only scrape away the human artistry behind so many of the sources that these AI models greedily gather up. There you go. There's me playing devil's advocate. Not a fan of AI. It is literally the best version I can think of. Just pay your people. How hard can it be? But otherwise, I've been talking for about an hour in this room, so I'd best finally end it off there. My name's been Daz. Thank you very much for reaching the end of this video. Do tell us your thoughts. This is an interesting think piece, as much as I don't think it's ever gonna be applied in the real world. I don't have hopes. But what would be your spin for coming up with an ethical AI generation idea? Maybe it can't be done. Maybe the final answer is simply no. But it's surrounding us anyway, so it's worth talking about in some sort of discussion. I'd love to hear all of your thoughts and more, but otherwise for now, I shall see you all in a little bit. Cheerio!